Hello, my name is Simon and I am the Cranmer Common Room President. We are celebrating Black History Month here at Cranmer, marking the significant role that BAME people have had within the life of Cranmer and in the wider church. And I'm here today with Reverend Shanti Thompson, an alumni of Cranmer Hall, currently serving in the Diocese of Carlisle. How are you doing today, Shanti?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good to be with you. I wonder if you could start us off by talking a bit about where's home for you?
Home for me, that's a very good question. Home for me at the moment is a vicarage in Staveley, which is in South Cumbria, not far from Windermere. You might be familiar with Windermere. Home is usually, I would say, where my family are. And while my children are grown up and gone away, as it were, my home currently is with my husband here in Staveley. I grew up in Southport on Merseyside. So when people ask me the question, oh, where are you from? That's an unusual name, they say. Where are you from? I usually say Staveley. And then they say, no, where are you from? So I then say, oh, I'm from Southport. And then you get this awkward pause. And they say, where are you? But where? And I say, oh, my father was Sri Lankan. Is that what you'd like to know? So, yeah, home is here. I was born and brought up in the UK, and I still have a lot of family in Sri Lanka now.
Grew up in the north?
Grew up in the north, yes, absolutely, yes. I don't do cold though, so that's not probably an advantage living here. Yes, it's very wet as well in the Lake District.
What was your journey to faith?
I consider myself to have been really blessed because I grew up in a Christian family, and my father used to pray with us when I was little. We went to church from being tiny, and to Sunday school and to youth groups and all those different things, and being in church on a Sunday morning. And then I was at youth group meeting, I think it was Crusaders at that time, and we had a speaker, a chap called Peter Heaps from Crusaders, who came and talked to us about how important it was to own the faith for yourself. And up until that point, I think I felt that I was a Christian. I would say I've always been a Christian, and I was growing up in this Christian family, and church was mine, but I'd never actually made a commitment. And Peter made it really clear to us that to truly get all the blessings from God and to have that hope and the love of Christ, you needed to actually pray a prayer. And I did that night. I prayed and gave my life to Christ. And so I was about 17 at that point. And really, people did notice a difference in me. I wasn't saying I was a complete rebel before, but people noticed a peace, I think, that they hadn't seen before in me. And I certainly was aware of Christ's guidance in my life in a bigger way than it had been before. And then that led me into getting involved in leading groups at church and stuff as well.
So what was your journey then? Got a bit about coming to faith. What about the journey to ordination? What did that look like?
Well, I was very old when I came to felt the call to ordination. I began to feel that God wanted me to do something more with my faith, and in a very practical way. And I began to feel, because I was already involved in youth groups we're in the holiday club and stuff at my church. I thought, obviously, God gave me the seed of an idea, and I thought, well, I must be supposed to be a youth worker. So my church very kindly sponsored me to do the Engage Youth Work course at St John's, Nottingham. And I started that, and in the second module, I got this overwhelming sense of, this isn't it. And I thought, oh dear, this is terrible. So what is it? And then it started to dawn on me that God maybe called me to ordination. And we had a deanery mission not long afterwards with students from the college in Cambridge. I can't remember the name of the theological college in Cambridge is now. Ridley, that's it. They came and they were talking about what they were doing on their training, and every time they spoke, I just kept getting this, oh my goodness, this is what I should be doing. And the bishop had a breakfast for the potential ordinands. I knew that was coming up at the end of the week, but it had never dawned on me that was something that I should be doing. And we had a meal. You had to have a meal. We were encouraged rather to have a meal that week with friends from work or friends from community, and some of the Ridley students would speak at the meal and tell your guests what they were doing. So for me, it took a huge amount of courage to say to my workmates, would you like to come for dinner? And would you like to listen to somebody who's training to be a vicar? And
where were you working at the time?
Oh, right. I was working in a hospital in a laboratory. So I was a microbiologist studying infection and doing blood tests and such. And the real draw for my friends to come for this meal was because they were going to. I was having it at my mum's house because I lived further away. So they all fancied, I think, nosy at my mum's house. So had the meal. The candidate, the ordinand spoke really very well. And the next morning, I just got a text from my best friend saying, I think you should be doing this. And I thought, she said that, I've got to do something. So I spoke to my vicar and said, this sounds ridiculous, but I think God's calling me to ordination. And he said, oh, good, he's told you, has he? He told me ages ago. Oh. So I went through the process as a lot of Cranmer students would have gone through the selection process. Had my got my BAP result on the 13th of July, and it was a yes, which was a shock. I gave him my notice on the Monday morning and left work a month later and started Cranmer about 3 weeks before I was 40.
What was it that drew you to Cranmer?
Well, I was going to St John's, Nottingham. There was no doubt about it because I'd visited it before. My husband went through selection some years previously and wasn't recommended. So obviously that was a difficulty for me, not for him. So we'd visited St John's. Engage was at St John's, so we were going for St John's. But we were told by Liverpool Diocese to visit 2 colleges. So we went to Durham because, well, it's in the north, it's not too far away, and they wanted us to stay overnight. Oh, that's 2 days leave off work. And we pulled up outside the cathedral and got out the car and went, doesn't really matter what the college is like because this is where God wants us. And the college was lovely. And the fact that we were so close to the cathedral and it was a great place for my children who were at that time going into year 8 and year 6. So it was a crucial time for them. It was a good place for them to be. And so, yeah, so we get out the car and made us pick Cranmer. When we went to the college, it was just what we wanted. And the university, the college found us a little house to live in, not far from Cranmer. And that was good. And I did the diploma for 2 years. And at the end of the first year, we didn't celebrate Black History Month at Cranmer when I was there. At the end of the first year, we had Diversity Week. I'm sure you're smiling. You've done Diversity Week. Okay, and we had a speaker who came to talk about Black theology. Now, in my set, in the year that I was in, there were 3 of us of ethnic minorities. Myself, so I'm half Sri Lankan. There was a lad who was half Chinese, and there was a great guy who was from Belgium, but he's Belgian Congo in background. And the lecturer directed his whole lecture to this to my Black friend, and it just talked about being Afro-Caribbean. Didn't touch on any other ethnic minority, and certainly didn't touch on people who were of mixed race. And I'd started to struggle a little bit with what does it mean to be of mixed race, because I grew up in a very white place. Obviously, at the north, Durham is a very white city. Liverpool was very white when I was around that area. And so I kind of really got a bit messed up. I didn't really know who I was, where I was coming from. Spoke to a really good curate, Black curate at St Nick's in Durham at the time, who helped me a bit. And this is going to sound weird, but the thing that helped me most was that during the first summer, between the 2 weeks of my, could you still call it the pastoral study unit? We were doing outdoor pursuits and ministry.
You have the mission studies blocks at the end of it.
Yes, that's right. So we were in the middle of that week, and my dad took very ill and died. Wow. And obviously it was a huge shock to us all. But over that summer, I came to realise that I was grateful to my dad for two things, lots of things, but the two main things. One was for my faith, and the second was for my colour. And that, through God's grace, sorted my head out. But I think theological college, a lot of it is about understanding yourself through the lens of your faith and through what God's calling you to. And that means sometimes you've got to examine everything else that makes you you. And for me, that was sorting out my faith, my colour rather. And that, so everything's all right now. I've got my head together. And I do go a nice colour in the summer. And it's interesting to see how my heritage has passed to my children. My daughter is more of my complexion, and my son is, you would not know he had any relations that weren't white, and yet their attitude and the way they live their lives is reflects my mixed heritage, and I'm enormously proud of them for that.
Very significant.
Yeah.
And then after college?
After college, when I was at Cranmer, I felt called to rural ministry, and being from Liverpool diocese doesn't really match. Although they did try to persuade me actually that I lived not far from Aintree at the time, and they did try to persuade me that well, I lived there before I went to Cranmer, sorry, that a parish near Aintree Racecourse would probably work. And I thought, well, there is grass and there is horses, but it's kind of not rural, really. And the Bishop of Carlisle came to visit his ordinance, James Newcombe. And one of his ordinands said to me, look, if you're called to rural, you have to go and talk to Bishop James. So he dragged me out of church history, which obviously broke my heart, and dragged me off for a cup of hot chocolate at Costa in Durham, and basically said, well, we'd love to have you, Caroline. So they adopted me. Liverpool let me go, and I was ordained in the cathedral in 2009 and served a 4-year curacy in Kirby Lonsdale in a team ministry with 8 churches. And I did 4 years, not because I was naughty, but because that put my children at just having done GCSEs and just having done A-levels. So it was a perfect time to move. And now I'm slightly further north in the diocese.
Lovely part of the world.
It is. Yeah, very wet, very cold, but it's sunny today.
Would you say that, are there any particularly influential people or groups that have had an influence on your ministry? I
would say that CIMIAC, which is the Committee for Minority Ethnic Anglican Concerns, has been hugely helpful for me. They got in touch very soon after I went to Cranmer and invited all the ethnic minority students to an Ordinance Day in London, and have continued to invite to various different things over time. I'm now the link person for my diocese, and I do meet up with the other ethnic minority clergy in the diocese. I say meet up. Isaac and I have a coffee occasionally because there are already 2 of us. But CIMIAC helped me because it let me know that if I ever had a problem, there was someone I could go to, and was just very encouraging, really. I think the senior leadership of this diocese have been really encouraging to me. But growing up, going through the sort of discernment process, I had never met any women clergy before, and I had never met any clergy of ethnic minorities except for my 2 uncles in Sri Lanka, who I hadn't seen for years. So for me, getting to Cranmer and finding there were other women and women in ministry was a huge bonus, and finding that there were other people of ethnic minorities who were training as well was good.
And what would you say have been some of both the joys and the challenges of serving as a BAME person within the Church of England?
I think the challenges are, and I think this probably is fueled also by the fact that I'm female, is that when somebody takes against you, or somebody from your church objects to something you're doing that you feel is really of God, unless you actually ask them, they won't tell you whether that's because you're a woman, because you're not white, or just because they don't like you. And I think that is a huge challenge, because you don't want to out and out accuse people of being racist, because that doesn't help anybody unless you're absolutely sure. So I think it's a challenge sometimes to step back and say, why is this? Now, I have had issues, and my archdeacon will tell you that it's because the people concerned were racist. I don't know, because I've never had the courage to ask them. And I don't think asking them would help, to be honest. I think it potentially would dig up a whole can of worms, and I could end up in all sorts of trouble. So I think that's one of the challenges, is not knowing. Serving in a very white area, you get some lovely comments, and when I say ignorance, I don't mean that people are stupid, just that because they don't meet many people of ethnic minorities, they don't have a language to deal with it. So I had a lovely lady once did the whole, where are you from? So I thought, actually, no, I'm just going to say Kevin Lonsdale. No, really from Merseyside. No, really from. And I said, oh, my father's Sri Lankan and my mother is white British. Oh, right, she said. We don't get many of you. You're a bit like little green men from Mars, aren't you? Now, my colleagues were horrified, but I just thought, well, she's just trying to say, I don't meet many people that aren't white. So sometimes you just have to cope with the language. But the joys are, I think, are huge, because I've been able to be a lot of the firsts in Carlisle. So I'm first woman in the parishes that I'm serving, but first non-white person. And as far as I know, I'm the first non-white canon in the cathedral. And because we want to show the diversity of Carlisle, even though it's a very white area, and we want to be encouraging to anybody of any background, you're often put in the forefront. So it's not tokenism, I don't think. I think it's inclusivity. So often I've been asked to do things that perhaps my white colleagues haven't been, but I just think, wait, I'm just going to be the best person to do this, and do this to the best of my ability. And if it gives somebody of an ethnic minority an example that they can do this too, then hey, then that's great.
Yeah, an enormous privilege, I imagine.
I think it is it's a bit daunting sometimes, yeah. But actually, no, I think you just have to go for it.
One final question. What advice would you give to ordinands who are training at the moment? What advice, pearl of wisdom, maybe?
To all ordinands, or just ethnic minority ordinands?
Maybe both.
Okay.
I don't know. Both, maybe.
I suppose it goes for both, really. I think if you're given an opportunity to grab it with both hands and be the best that you can be, I would say if there's any experiences that you haven't had before and you're offered an opportunity, then go along and do it and have a go. Because as a curate, you have a huge amount of goodwill attached to you. And people are very forgiving. So even though you may be different to anybody that church has ever had serving them before, then you've been offered that position. So take it and be the best you can. And it's not all going to be smooth, because life isn't. And I refuse to believe anybody that says what they did before they came to Cranmer was everything was always happy and lovely. But take every opportunity you've got, and God's called you to this, and don't ever forget that. He's called you by name, and He's going to be with you.
Thank you. Would you mind praying for us at Cranmer as we close?
I will do that. Yeah, let's pray. Loving Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the blessing that theological colleges are to their students. And I want to pray your blessing upon all those who study at Cranmer and those particularly who are studying for ministry in your church. Give them, Father, an inquiring mind, a huge heart for the ministry you're calling them to, and a love for your people, and the churches and the communities to which they're called. Bless them richly, Lord. Be with them and give them all the confidence they need to speak out your gospel and never to be afraid. Amen.
Amen.